Welcome to this edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com. Today I'm joined by Dave Taylor, a single dad to three who blogs about divorce, parenting, and being a single father at GoFatherhood.com. Now, Dave's insightful and often humorous posts run the gamut from handling his teenage daughter's dating to managing a household to long-distance parenting problems that frequently exist for divorced dads. So Dave, I wanted to ask you, what made you want to put together this blog that really showed the reality of your post-divorce life and parenting, warts and all?
Actually, Go Fatherhood started out as the attachment parenting blog, and it was a blog that my then wife and I were writing together, although honestly it was 99% me, and she would just occasionally look and say, really? Do we have to say that? And then when we went through the divorce, and then subsequently when I became a single dad, I sort of danced around the topic. I think I was fairly low key about it because I really wanted to be careful not to A, embarrass my children, or B, really vent, because there's a lot of frustration. It's very difficult, the whole divorce process. And you know, when you go through a divorce with someone where everyone's very mature and everything goes very smoothly, I suppose it's not too painful, but I went through what would be modestly described as a very contentious divorce. I mean, it took us over a year just to negotiate points, which was just an insanely long amount of time, and frankly, very hurtful.
Well, is there anything off limits you won't discuss on your blog?
There was a lot I didn't put on my blog, and even to this day, now that I've been doing the single dad thing for 3.5 years, there's definitely stuff I don't put on my blog, including, for example, pictures of my kids and their names. And so I try to be circumspect because I'm really conscious of privacy. And I know that with my oldest being 15, it's not going to be long before she realizes, ooh, if I read Dad's blog, I'll know what's going down. So I want to be careful about that. And it's also privacy for myself. I mean, there are things that happen in my life, just as there are things in anyone's life, where it's really not for public. It's certainly for my friends and my family. And my dad has had to endure daily earfuls from me and still does 3.5 years, well, 5 years later. It's amazing. But that doesn't mean it needs to be out on the public eye. And I will say also, as a parent blogger or as a daddy blogger, I've definitely had the experience where I'll write about something where I made a decision about a parenting issue and then get just roundly criticized by people, most of whom don't have kids, and all of whom are happy to tell me how I did it wrong and have really messed up my kids. That's a drag. And I will tell you that, in my opinion, one of the benefits of being a daddy blogger is maybe having some humility. I mean, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm just trying my best. And, you know, my heart's in the right place and I'm earnest and enthused, but you just try. And, you know, we just, as dads, I think we just try our best. And frankly, a society that kind of stacks the deck against us. But that is a separate topic.
Now, you wrote on your site that it sucks being a divorced single dad. You say divorce and single parenting is even more difficult for men because our culture assumes women are naturally good mothers, while men have to struggle to be involved and be good fathers. So how do you deal with these obstacles your situation presents and ultimately overcome them?
Yeah, actually, my teenager and I had this discussion just 2 days ago. And as she was so candid, it sucks being a divorced kid. And it kind of sucks being divorced, not for me. I mean, I actually am happier now that I was in a very difficult and unpleasant marriage. And I know my ex would say the same thing too. And that's fine. I mean, you know, life is a journey and all that sort of stuff. But for the kids, they didn't choose this. They didn't say, I think I want a mom and dad that are going to get divorced and really not like each other very much. And for them, every week is a drag. Every day that they have to switch from one house to the other, or they're at mom's house and realize they left their book at dad's, or they're at dad's house and they realize that their makeup is at mom's house or something, it's just a drag, you know? And so to some extent, I think inherently, and this is something that we don't really acknowledge, is that divorce really stinks for the kids. And there's different ways to address it, but unfortunately, in my experience, the most common way to experience or to address that issue is for the kids to never be with their dad. And so they're full-time with their mom, and their dad sees them, if they're lucky, maybe for a couple hours on a weekend or maybe for an overnight. And that's a really good way to have dad get out of the picture. but it's not a good way for kids to grow up knowing a strong male and female presence. And I will say that there are classes at my kids' schools where there are, well, 30 to 40% of the kids are from divorced households. And my daughter or my son is the only one whose dad is still in the picture in any meaningful way. I mean, there are dads that live in other states. There are dads that have restraining orders against them. There are dads that just aren't allowed to be with their kids. And there are kids that, frankly, don't want to be with their dads. And, you know, I mean, you have to honor the wishes of the children, too, to some extent. But I just see that it's a very easy, repetitive cycle of the dad gets pushed out. They don't spend much time with their child. So they don't have those chops of being really good at parenting and knowing how to deal with someone being fussy or cranky or rude without getting angry. And then the kids say, well, geez, dad's always angry. I don't want to be with him anymore. And then poof, they're no longer in the picture. And now you have a generation of children being raised with minimal, if any, male presence or with minimal or any fathers. And I think that's a serious problem. And I think we're going to really regret it as a society in the very near future.
Well, you and I, we met at the Dad 2.0 Summit, what essentially was a convention of dad bloggers, and honestly a community I wasn't all that familiar with before attending that seminar. And we have hundreds of thousands of dads who visit our site who probably are just as unaware of this large community of dad bloggers that exists out there as well. So what would be your pitch to a guy, to a dad who's newly single, fresh off a divorce? What would you say to him to encourage him to check out these blogs? What do you think that guys get out of reading, sort of these fellow dad blogs?
So one of the things that I experienced when I went through my divorce is I suddenly had to gain more parenting skills. So I had my kids, and unfortunately, when we were just separated, there were a couple of spectacular flameouts. Now, to sort of put the balance there were some moments when, their mom didn't do very well either and, had all sorts of problems, and I had to go and rescue the kids from her. But she definitely had to come and rescue the kids from me when things just got so tense and we just so ended up going head to head that it was really hard. And I look back on those and I'm frankly embarrassed. I am sorry for my children, and we still talk about it years later. We will still bring up oh, do you remember what happened Thanksgiving? And that was so hard, and I did such a poor job, and I'm so sorry. And we sort of, you get by, you keep moving, but it's really hard to learn how to go from being the sort of, if you will, non-mother parent to suddenly having to be the mother and the father. Because when the kids are with you and you're single as a parent, you really got to do everything. And so in our relationship, what happened was I was perhaps prototypically, and I don't completely agree with this, but I was generally sort of the bad cop and mom was the good cop. So if they did something wrong, I would be the one saying, you need a consequence. And mom would be the one saying, oh, but they were really tired, so let's just give them a pass on this one. And then what happened was that when I was doing it by myself, I had to learn, oh my gosh, I actually have to be the good cop and the bad cop in one. So I had to learn to be more sympathetic. I had to learn to cut my kids more slack. And I had to learn to be more willing to let them get away with little things in the interest of saving our issues for bigger things. And I think one of the biggest challenges if you're going through a divorce or you are divorced is to learn how to do that. I mean, if you're a guy, if you're a typical guy, you're much more comfortable watching a football game. You're much more comfortable having a meeting at work. You're much more comfortable sitting at your computer doing stuff than you are dealing with an unhappy 4-year-old or a smart alecky 12-year-old. And that's okay. I mean, you absolutely have the ability to gain all these skills and be a rockin' parent, but it's not going to come overnight. Frankly, it might not come from reading books. And that's where dad blogs are really great. And one of the things that I really try to do on mine is I try to talk about, the situation as opposed to just here's what happened, here's what I did. It's just like, here's what I think was going on in their head. Here's what I thought. Here's what I would have done differently had I have had more time to think or process what was going on. So, absolutely, it is a perfectly reasonable and probably critical time in your life for you to reach out and ask for help. And the nice thing about dad blogs is the dad community, as we've learned at the Dad 2 Summit, is the dad community is really friendly. And there are a lot of guys that have a huge dose of humility, and it is definitely not a bunch of guys saying, well, I've mastered this fatherhood thing, so you just need to follow my stuff and read my book and get my webinar. and you'll be doing great too. It's really not that. It's really a lot of guys saying, geez, I'm struggling. I don't know what the heck to do. And I do that too. I will post sometimes on my blog saying, here's this situation that's come up and I don't know what to do. I need advice, help. So whether or not you would want to join the ranks of someone blogging, and that's cool either way, but reading other people, other men's challenges, other single fathers' challenges, other challenges of going through the divorce process can really help you understand that you aren't in this alone.
Well, thanks, Dave, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we sign off?
It's not easy being a single dad. It's not easy being a single dad, even if you're only somewhat involved with your children, even if you only see them a day a week. And I will say there's lots and lots of resources for you. Be comfortable asking for help, and ask men if you don't want to ask women. You might be surprised your dad might have some good advice. And of course, I'd be very happy to hear from you, and you're absolutely welcome to come and check out my dad blog, which is at gofatherhood.com. I'm also on Facebook, Google+. You can find me on Twitter as Dave Taylor. And hey, if I can help, let me know. Thanks.
Well, thanks again, Dave. That was Dave Taylor, a single dad of 3 who blogs about divorce, parenting, and being a single father at his website, gofatherhood.com. That'll do it for this edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com. We'll see you next time.